Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on the Weekend Show. My name is Andy Badaki.
And I'm Edidion Frank.
What was your favorite moment of primary school as a girl child?
Lunch. My school provided lunch for everyone, and it was amazing. I always looked forward to that.
Interesting. So, International Women's Day, International Women's Month, this year it's been on Accelerate Action. What do you think is a key driver to accelerate action for girls and women?
Number one, education.
Education, and that's what we will be talking about today with the Chief Executive Officer and representatives from champions from the Malala Fund, Nigeria. It's going to be an interesting conversation because I always look forward to learning from such. But interestingly, for the Malala Fund, the theme is Accelerate Progress for Girls, which is all encompassing. But it's not for me to say. Let's listen and learn from our guests. And joining us, we have.
We have Nabila Aguelo, who is the Chief Executive Malala Fund Nigeria. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have Deborah of Botokai, who is the Girls Education Advocate, the Nigerian Girl Guides Association. Good morning.
Good morning.
And we're happy to have you here today with us.
Thank you.
We also have joining us virtually Buki Shonibare, who is the Malala Fund Education Champion and Executive Director in Invictus Africa.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Buki, and welcome. We have to start with you, Nabila. And for people who don't know about the Malala Fund, we'd like you to tell us about it. But for me, what struck my attention doing research about this was the focus on 12 years, which I kept on seeing on your website. I've heard you talk about it in a couple of presentations and speeches you've made. So tell the average Nigerian what this is all about.
Great. Thanks so much for having us on, Andy.
You're welcome.
So Malala Fund is a global advocacy organization. We believe strongly that all girls should be able to access and complete 12 years of education. So that's their schooling all the way through secondary school. We believe fundamentally that this is their right, and also really strongly advocate on the benefits to both girls, their communities, and countries and economies from educating girls. And we do this through our advocacy as well as our grant making. We have partners like Buki at Invictus Africa that are grassroots local organizations working both with policymakers and with communities to advocate for change in the education sector.
Buki, I'd like you to, join in on this. Firstly, we understand that Malala Fund has been a great advocate for the girl child in general and across board. But I would like to know, in what ways has the Malala Fund, transformed opportunities for women globally?
Last part of your question.
Yeah, I said, in what way has the Malala Fund transformed opportunities for women globally?
I think one way has been for us to see a lot of advocacy around girl child education globally. Even though it was started based off on the sad incidents that happened to Malala Yousafzai, we've been able to see a whole lot around advocating for girls across the world, including Nigeria. Of course, the abduction of the Chibok girls comes to mind, and how that opened the conversation around, access to education for girls, particularly in conflict-ridden communities. We've also seen through the Malala Fund work around advocating for gender responsiveness in education, the education sector as a whole, not just in the planning, but also in budgeting and in spending. And by extension, we've seen that advocacy for a gender responsive education sector planning, a gender responsive education budgeting, gender responsive education spending, and budget spending. And what that translates to is that we are beginning to see a lot more concentration on the gender sensitivity of our education sector. And practically what that means is looking at these peculiar and intersecting issues that impact on girls in different communities in Nigeria, and how all of those issues, prevent them from accessing or being retained or completing basic education. And for us as Malala Fund Education Champions, basic education for us means primary school, junior secondary school, and senior secondary school. And I'll wrap up that thought by saying that one way that we have also seen a lot of work that Malala Fund has done is around ensuring the safety and security of schools. A lot of the champions are working in different parts of Nigeria, pushing for security and safety of schools across Nigeria.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Buki, before I come to Deborah in studio, when we started this segment, and it sounded like a joke, but Didi mentioned that she enjoyed the free lunch when she was in primary school. And I
Mm.
have seen the impact the school feeding project has had in making sure children come to school. I mean, we go for weddings, we go for events because we know that's one free meal. Unfortunately, we find out that some of these responsibilities are now being outsourced to stakeholders such as the Malala Fund, but the government still has a major role to play. And I'm going to ask the same question to Deborah, but Buki, while we have you here, what urgent actions and steps do you think the government should play in ensuring that we have improved action?
I think one urgent action will still go back to making sure that we have gender responsiveness or gender sensitivity in our education sector. What that means is that we're able to integrate gender analysis in planning, in budgeting, in monitoring, in evaluation. And practically, it means that we are, looking at budget allocation to programs and actions that, guarantee enrollment, high retention, high completion for schoolgirls. We're looking at also the issue around, scholarships for young girls, especially girls in communities or in areas where we know that data has shown historic marginalization of those school children. And so scholarship programs, you've also talked about school feeding programs. When there is an issue, that impacts on education of school children, girls are usually disproportionately affected. And then we also see, the need for us to make sure that more female teachers are actually employed and they are trained in gender responsiveness in the delivery of education for young girls. But most importantly, also, we must continue to raise awareness on the social norms that impact on girls. It means that we need to talk about engage community to shift those social norms in such a way that not just identify those social norms, but also address them in a way that we can shift them towards a way where it doesn't impact on girl child education. And most importantly, we must also support and amplify initiatives that are led by girl children. We are all having this conversation today based off on issues around, what Malala Fund has been championing. Malala herself is a young girl who used the unfortunate situation or what happened to her to be able to amplify the need for girls' education. There are girls across the world who, on a daily basis, are facing, such risk, and we must advance and amplify, those initiatives that are led by such girls, and we have many of them in Nigeria.
Thanks, Buki.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Before we, let you go and focus on our guest here in the studio, um, millions of girls do not have, access to quality education despite all the progress, despite all the change and all the action that has been, done. But I would like to hear your thoughts on what urgent actions do you think the government stakeholders now, could take to accelerate change?
Section 14, subsection 2B of the Constitution says that the primary responsibility of the government shall be the security and the welfare of the people. And if you look at Section 18 of our Constitution, it also guarantees the right of girls to education, the right of school children, children generally to education. And, that ties into the conversation we're having earlier, or the point I was making earlier, that no matter what civil society organizations do, government must continue to take that primary responsibility. And so, beyond making sure that our policies, our budgeting, our spending align with gender responsiveness, One way that we must also amplify is the importance of empowering, women economically in such a way that paves the way for more girls to also come in, not just to be economically empowered, but also to be educated. The more women we have in policy making, we've seen how that translates into gender sensitivity in our policy making, gender sensitivity. We know budget is also a law, gender sensitivity in budget. What that means practically is that the budget lines, we're not talking about a separate budget. What that means is that budget lines contain, specific lines that identify and respond to peculiar issues that impact on girls. Part of what we are doing under being a Malala Fund champion for myself as well as Invictus Africa is that we did a baseline assessment in Oyo and Gombe State. The dynamics in those two states are different. While in Oyo, we see a lot of boys, not going to school, and how that by extension impact on girls' education in Gombe. We see more girls where even though um, enrollment rate is increasing, the retention and completion is decreasing, especially when you go higher up in class. And I'm tying that to the women's economic empowerment policy that we have in Nigeria that came into effect in 2022. Because what that does is that if you look at part of the 7-point focus of that policy, you see how education, skill development, and information access is one of the core pillars of the WE policy. So even though we are looking at education policies, education budget, there are other adjoining policies that the government must focus on and pay attention to, such as the WE policy, to make sure that not only are women empowered, but that we are preparing our young women, our young girls to also be economically empowered. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you so
thank you
much,
so much.
Buki, and for all the work you do with Martin Victor's Africa, especially around empowerment. Because for us to sustain the solutions, for us to have women and girls in school, we need to empower them economically, and that's extremely important. Deborah, I like the word champion. I prefer it to ambassador, so well done. What is it? What does it feel like being a Malala Fund champion? What does it mean to you, and what areas of the girl child education do you want to see changed and improved?
Thank you very much. So, being a Malala Fund Girl Champion, it's quite amazing. Through the platform of the Nigerian Girl Guides Association, I have been able to witness firsthand the amazing power of the girl child. I've been able to work in spaces. I've been able to speak up, have my ideas, my perspectives, and my views heard. So for me, it's like, oh wow, girls have this power, this much power. Imagine what an army of girls can do. If such a small group of girls can lead this change, imagine what an army of girls can do. And one particular area I would like to see change in girls' education is equal access. Believe it, we still do not have equal access to education, and this is 2025, and that's so unacceptable. In the SDGs, we say we aim to achieve the SDGs by 2030, and this is already 2025. And if you, like you rightly said, the number of out-of-school girls in Nigeria is still in millions. So there's still a lot of work to do to accelerate progress.
Nabila, bouncing off of what she just said about lots of work to do. I understand the community has a role to play. So in what ways does the Malala Fund, your organization, help to transform change when it comes to the mindset of certain people in the communities across Nigeria who don't see the impact or the necessity of education in the girl child?
Great. I love this question. So we do it in two ways. I mean, you've heard Buki speak about her work. We have a number of other champions whose work is community facing. So through our grant work, we believe fundamentally that this work needs to be done at ground level by local organizations. That is our fundamental belief, and so that is where we put the majority of our money. So for example, in a number of states, we have organizations that are working directly with girl voices. So empowering girls to use their voice to advocate directly to community members, to traditional rulers, community members, their own families, about why they believe education is important to them. I think the most important thing is to hear directly from the girls, to recognize that education is something that they value and they want to have access to, and creating those platforms for girls to speak directly to their communities has been a really effective tool. Another way in which we have engaged through our grantees, our partners, and through our own advocacy and that of our co-founders is by engaging directly with leaders, right? Whether it's policymakers themselves, even with traditional rulers, we're going to be doing increasingly more work with men and boys, recognizing the important role that they have to play both as stakeholders for whom girls' education is beneficial, but also for those whose mindsets may need to be changed in terms of these trade-offs that have to be made. What we find oftentimes is that communities and families do want their girls to go to school, right? But they are faced with incredibly challenging circumstances. If we think about the current macroeconomic circumstances in Nigeria, the continuing inflation and cost of living crisis, a lot of families and communities are facing difficult trade-offs. Do we send this girl to school or do we do other things? And for us, through the work and through our own advocacy, is to demonstrate that while it may seem in the moment that this is an investment that will not reap benefits, we want to demonstrate that it is what the girls want, and also it leads to improved outcomes for the girls themselves. They have better earning potential. They're able to bring better impact to their homes and their communities at large, both in terms of their own livelihoods, but also in terms of the well-being of their families as well. So community engagement is critical. And the last thing I would say is, in engaging communities, it's so important to hear first and to listen intently for the challenges, the perspectives, and really some of the intent behind the social norms that we see. So hidden behind these social norms are realities of poverty. And you talked about school feeding. Right, so the very act of putting food in a school environment ensures that families are better positioned to send their girls to school. The very act of engaging fathers so that they understand the economic benefit of sending their girls to school is important. So really listening for and understanding the challenges is critical.
Okay, Nabil, one of the conversations which we always have every International Women's Month is about breaking gender norms and stereotypes. And I grew up in a time where I actually experienced this. I went to a federal school, among the 3 schools I went to in Nigeria, and a teacher once said that arts class is a dumping ground for intellectual idiots, and that it's only for girls and boys should go to science classes. At that point, I wanted to study law at some point. But I couldn't go to arts class because there were 59 girls and 4 boys. And so I opted for a commercial science class, which I failed. And I had to change schools and go to an only male school where I did arts and enjoyed it. And so we still have these norms, that this is even the basis for the Malala Fund, where she was trying to break a norm. We saw what happened just last year where the Taliban took over in Afghanistan and have already said, oh, women shouldn't go to school or practice several bits. In Nigeria, it's still a problem. Gender norms and stereotypes poses a great problem, even when you have the right policies and even economic power. Who should be the right allies, and what should we as a nation do to ensure that we aren't stuck in the past?
Right. This is such an incredible question. And I think when it comes to shifting mindsets and shifting these norms, we all have a responsibility. This platform, the very fact that this is a conversation that we're having and that you're offering your own story, is an important tool. So the media, for me, both news media as well as fictional media, the stories we tell, are we being intentional about the ways in which we look for gender bias and the ways in which some of the stories that we tell perpetuate harmful norms? Are we telling different stories? Another thing that's really important is having conversations that have the girls at the table. The best way to dispel myths about girls' seriousness and the areas that they have aptitude to thrive in is to have them at the table. Last year we had an international Day of the Girl event, and Deborah was part of a panel. She was the only young woman on that panel. She spoke alongside senior officials from government, both executive and legislature, as well as officials from the World Bank. And people were wowed. And the reason they were is because, unfortunately, there are still very few spaces where young women, where girls' voices are heard in ways that are non-tokenistic. So we really need to shift that. Community stakeholders are critical. The families themselves, traditional rulers, community leaders, and even the policymakers. I mean, when we think about shifting gender norms, we focus so much on the community, and we forget that our policymakers, our legislators are themselves members of community and can perpetuate these harmful gender norms, even in the way they enact and implement policy. So everyone needs to be involved, and we need to, first of all, recognize that there is a problem and that we are all susceptible to it.
Okay.
Beyond education, which is primary, which is very important, what other key areas should be prioritized, to empower and uplift women globally?
Okay, so for me, education comes first.
Yeah.
Education comes first, second, and it comes thirdly. Then we have economic empowerment as well, just like Buki has rightly said, because without economic empowerment, women won't be heard. So when there's economic empowerment, we indirectly empower education, and there's reduced poverty, there's increased earning for the girl child, just like Nabila has said. And also just to add a little bit to the last question, when you talked about policies, I believe that when we stop making policies without the girl child, when we have a table where the girl child is being included in the decision-making processes, we move from policy making to impact. Because believe me, we have a lot of amazing policies around education in Nigeria. Every year we bring up policies upon policies upon policies. But these policies are being drafted without hearing from the girl child, without needs assessment. Now, we don't just want to hear from some girl child. We want to hear from all girl childs, from girls in rural areas, girls in marginalized communities, girls with disability, meeting each and every one of those girls at the point of their needs, because my need is different from your need. Your need is different from the need of a girl in a wheelchair that wants to go to school. So conducting needs assessments and not just creating policies based on assumptions would also go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I think that's a great place to leave it, but I'll give you 30 seconds for any final words you want to tell Nigerians and the girl child.
Absolutely. I think we've had an incredible conversation. Some key takeaways is the powerful nature of centering the wants and the needs of girls in the work that we do, whether it's policy facing or grassroots facing. And with that in mind, I'd love to share a copy of our Girls Vision report, which we launched in New York on the sidelines of the Conference on the Status of Women. This collects the perspectives of 800 girls worldwide who wanted to share and give impressions around why education is critical to them. The other thing I'd like to say is get involved, whether you're an individual, an organization, use your platform to push for increased access and completion for girls, and also be part of a collective action movement towards this goal.
Thank you so much, Nabila, Deborah, and Buki. You have the platform. You can always come back here, and any way we can help, we are very willing to support what you're doing. Like you said, the media has a major role to play. And it's extremely important that we support women to get into positions of power where they are decision makers. Out of 109 senators, we have 4 women.
Yeah.
How do we expect proper representation for women to speak on things which matter to them? So everyone has a role to play. And also for the men there, you have wives, you have children. It's not an us against them. We need to work together to ensure that there's equality, there's equity, and there's just a level playing field for every single person, especially the girl child. When we return, we have more on the weekend show from the Brain Champions Trivia with Tender and so many other segments for you on the weekend show. Don't go away. See you after this break.